Hey guys, it's Villain Theory, and today I'm talking about every villain's best modular sets. Now, I am just one person, so this best in this case is my opinion. You know, everyone will have a different opinion, but these are modular sets that are going to push the villains mechanically, also thematically, and sometimes just tweak the difficulty in interesting other ways. There's going to be a lot going on, a lot of variety. So in Marvel Champions, there's a villain, and they always have a default recommended modular set, which is the way a lot of people like to play the game. Nothing wrong with that, that's how I always play them to begin with, but a lot of people don't ever change these up. And the game is so versatile and replayable, I feel like if you're not changing up the modular sets, you're missing out on a significant amount of the customization in the game that can be really fun and make a big difference. But Fantasy Flight Games don't do a great job at teaching people about this. Some people think, if you change the modular set, you're not playing the scenario the proper way and all this stuff. And a lot of the time, you can make the scenario more difficult, more challenging, and more interesting. So I've got other videos on this in the past, but this video is meant to be very accessible. We're going to have a list of villains and a list of modular sets, and it's going to become really easy for you guys, hopefully, to just pick a villain and immediately have some interesting options to change things up. Some will be mechanical, like I say, some will be more thematic. A lot of them will be both. So what I've done is put together a PDF, and you can download it right now in the description, but just hold on before you run off and do that. It's a combination of hundreds of hours of playing Marvel Champions and lots, maybe hundreds of hours of analysis of Marvel Champions as well. So if you could slap the like button, maybe subscribe if you haven't already, it would mean a lot. But otherwise, yeah, feel free, go ahead, grab that PDF. You don't have to watch the rest of the video. I would only recommend you read the boring stuff at the beginning of the PDF. That will inform how to use the rest of the PDF. But if you're going to watch the video, we're going to talk through it all. And I'm not going to go through all 500 plus modular set combinations with the villains because that video would probably take about 10 hours. So I'm going to go over the highlights, show some of my thought process, and I think it's going to be really fun. I've put so much work into this. So first things first, well, I have rated these modular set combinations in terms of difficulty, and I should probably show you guys what I'm talking about here, because this is a big document. There is all 50 or so villains with, on average, over 10 modular sets each. A couple have less, most of them have more. So there's a whole ton of possibility here, and I've kind of color-coded each possibility, as well as naming each possibility, to kind of indicate how difficult they might be compared to the regular modular set they would have. But the thing is, you could get unlucky, and you might not draw any encounter cards from those modular sets during the villain's turn for the first 1, 2, 3, 4 turns. That's unlikely, to go on that long, but it is very possible. So as a card game, there's a big element of chance, and what we're really doing by changing the modular set is influencing the difficulty and influencing the different experience. It's not guaranteeing that every turn everything is going to be different all the time. I think that's important to note. And also, you could get lucky or unlucky, and things could be easier or harder for different reasons. I've written it all out, but it's very boring. If I stopped to read the whole thing, you guys would all click off the video. You guys would go and watch Nelson or something, and you should definitely check out the latest Shadow of the Cast episode. But that aside, basically the difficulty rating goes like this. Next to every modular set and villain combination, there's going to be a color. If it's green, it means that modular set is easier than that scenario's recommended modular set. If it's yellow, it's about the same difficulty as their regular modular set. And if it's orange, it's harder. If it's red, it's much harder. And if there's a purple skull, it is significantly harder. So keep that in mind as we're looking through. Some villains, like Risky Business, their default modular set is actually quite easy. So almost all the modular sets I'll be suggesting are going to be orange or harder in terms of the difficulty. So that might seem a bit weird, but that's just because of the default difficulty on those modulars. On the other hand, a villain like Nebula with Space Pirates, I'm probably on average recommending modular sets which are easier than Space Pirates, if that makes sense. Now, I should probably mention, for a lot of these scenarios, a lot of my recommendations go beyond the amount of modular sets that scenario normally has. Now, that is in the rules, and it's not all the time. It will vary. There's a couple which I actually prefer to add in extra. Then there are others where it's kind of, just as good either way, in my opinion. And then there are some where I don't actually want to change them at all, so they'll have none or maybe 1 or 2 where I've gone above the recommended amount, but normally I do stick for the regular amounts. I should also say, sometimes instead of using a modular set as a modular set, I've used a Nemesis set as a modular set. This is not in the official rules. However, the company behind the game has included doing this in their official challenges. They put out like 20 weekly challenges, I think earlier this year, or was it last year? Or I don't know when it started. I've lost track of everything. But they use Nemesis sets as modular sets, and it opens up a lot of possibilities. It's very fun. So, I don't know, maybe 5 to 10% of my suggestions will include those. I think it's really worth doing. If you normally change up the modular sets, this will give you even more replayability and different experiences. So let's zoom in a little. And again, this PDF, completely free, completely available, just down in the description, probably in the pinned comment as well. I've got this on my phone along with my other PDFs I've made, and I just, pull this up when we're about to play. And it's been so useful. I've been tweaking it a lot. And this is where we've got. So starting with Rhino, he has the bomb scare modular set normally, which is among the easiest ones in the game. He's a tutorial villain. That is a tutorial mod set, so it makes sense. But because of that, almost everything I'm recommending here is going to have the orange or red kind of difficulty color denotion. I don't know what to call it. Color marker, difficulty marker, because most mod sets are just harder than bomb scare, even though most of the time in the video, the villains are going to have a whole mixture of easier, about the same, and more difficult modular sets to what they normally have. But with Rhino, much like all the villains really here, I've looked at their themes and mechanics, and I've actually written them down in case you want to use these to help you pick different modular sets, or figure out maybe why I've used some of the ones I don't talk about, because again, over 500 of these, not talking about all of them. But for me, one of my favorite ones for Rhino is actually Clan Akaba, because it adds a bunch of minions that also add threat, but they don't add threat to the main scheme. So it challenges you in terms of dealing with minions, but it also challenges you in terms of threat removal, but it doesn't make the main scheme more likely to go over. It punishes you in a different way, which Rhino, in solo play, that main scheme is a little bit infamous for randomly going over, being a little bit swingy with advance. So I think Clan Akaba is a nice way to challenge you in terms of threat removal in Rhino without making it more likely to go over. Though I should say, while I mentioned solo here, I actually primarily play it 2-player. This is not just going to be for solo players, but on the flip side, solo has definitely been taken into account. So hopefully people have a lot of good experiences here. Rhino, however, and also Claw, who we're going to talk about next, have cards in their encounter deck which are pretty plain and don't really kind of combo with their hero card or their main scheme. They are kind of separate in a way, and that means we can very, very easily go to 2 modular sets added instead of just a regular one that they are quote-unquote recommended to have. Because if you add 2 modular sets into Rhino, well, his hero ability is still going to work the same, because he doesn't have one. Same for his main scheme. It's just kind of blank, except working as a main scheme. If we were to do this with someone like Magneto, we might get less magnet counters or interaction with the magnet counters, because the more we inflate the deck with extra modular sets, the more diluted those cards are, the less likely they are to come up and then trigger his special stuff. But for Rhino, doesn't really matter. So one of my other favorite ones here is Rhino's Rampage, which is Sinister Assault, which adds in 6 spider-themed enemies and State of Emergency, which, as it kind of suggests, the city's in a state of chaos, there's crime going on, and I think this just works really well with Rhino, who also has Sandman and Shocker as the minions in his own villain encounter deck. So by adding Sinister Assault and including Rhino himself along with Shocker and Sandman, we have 9 spider villains in one scenario, and with State of Emergency, they are causing all sorts of carnage all across the city that you have to deal with. All of these cards are pretty beefy, pretty impactful, and Rhino having a lot of plain cards, I think these things really, really benefit him. Zooming out a little and going over to Claw here, we have a few different themes and things going on here. One that might seem a bit weird is giving him Ransacked Armory in this guards named kind of combo here I put down. But he already has some armored guards in his encounter set. So by adding Ransacked Armory, he ends up having, I think, 5 copies of Armored Guard, which to me is just kind of funny. So that's kind of just a funny sort of twisting the game kind of thing. Something maybe not so obvious is giving him the Genosha modular set, which is the next one. But Genosha has a permanent setup card. It's a card that is always in play, and that means Claw always has the steady keyword, and that means it takes 2 stun cards to actually stun him. And that means his mechanic, which is getting extra boost cards when he attacks, is going to be harder to shut down, going to keep Claw doing what Claw really wants to do. Now, going a line down here, we've got Claw starts a band, Claw starts a zoo, and Sonic Screwdriver. These 3 kind of sets I've named have Band of Badoon, Menagerie Medley, and Anachronauts. And what all of these are modular sets full of minions, which almost all have boost icons, which means, yeah, they're really kind of interesting minions when they come as encounter cards, but also when Claw attacks and gets an additional boost card, you are going to have all sorts of chaotic effects triggering. You're going to have Badoon jumping out at you, Sonic Ghosts attacking you, and the Anachronauts are going to cause even more additional boost cards and nasty effects while that's going on. And if you're just adding one modular set in, as recommended, they're definitely what I like to add, but note that, they are obviously more difficult than Masters of Evil, which is Claw's default set. If you want to add in 2 sets, I really like Boosted Boombox, which is a very simple premise. With Claw, when people do change the mod sets, they do like them to, have interesting boost effects for when Claw attacks and gets extra boost cards. That makes a lot of sense, and honestly, at one point I had a list of like 23 mod sets, which are all interesting with boost effects, and I was just going to have that originally before the kind of concept expanded. But what you can also do aside from, boost effects, boost stars, is to have the regular boost icons which increase damage. So Sinister Assault, we talked about that a little bit with Rhino adds a lot of spider villains. But what it also does is all of them have 3 boost icons on them. With Mutant Insurrection, all of them have 2 boost icons and one has 4 boost icons. So when you add the Sinister Assault and Mutant Insurrection set all into Claw, when Claw does attack, he's going to hit like a truck, and I think it's very, very fun. Sometimes both of his boost cards will be from his own set or the standard set, and he'll just tickle you gently. And then other times you might get hit for like 6-7 damage, which is terrifying. So hopefully you guys can see the kind of thought process behind some of these choices. I've even put 2 extra mod sets in for a couple of these at the bottom of Rhino and Claw. I just do this occasionally, usually to make things a lot more difficult, to kind of push the game in more interesting ways. With Claw, I've got Boost Card High Score and Necronauts, Space Pirates, Hard Sound. All 3 of these modular sets have cards which give the villain additional boost cards. Claw already has additional boost cards. Giving someone with additional boost cards a chance to get more cards which add more boost cards can start a chain reaction, which I don't normally recommend. This is just pushing the game, seeing what you can do. But if you want something a little bit crazy and spicy and quite difficult, you're certainly welcome to try it. But normally I'd recommend sticking with something more to the kind of, depending on what difficulty you're looking for, green, yellow, orange, red if you're confident in that scenario or looking for something a bit more challenging. Next, we have Ultron, and I should mention, next to each villain's name, there is the set they are from, the expansion, the scenario packs, so on and so forth. You guys probably noticed, but I feel like I should mention it out loud. But we have Ultron, and Ultron is all about drones. And all his encounter cards kind of mess with drones or create drones in some way. So adding extra modular sets is generally not something I recommend with Ultron, because the more you dilute his deck, the less drone-based antics he's going to be doing. But one modular set, like his normal under attack, I think is very fun. And if you do have a strong theme or strong reason, you can go one over, like those really difficult ones I have at the bottom of Ultron's kind of little section on here. So my favorite for Ultron is what I've called AI Hive Mind. Obviously AI here stands for actual Italian. So what Guerrilla Tactics does as a modular set, because that is the modular set here, is it responds to how many enemies are in play, and the more that are in play, the worse its cards are. So because Ultron is always creating more drones, Guerrilla Tactics is always going to be firing, it's always going to be triggering on an extra enemy or 2 a lot of the time, and that can be quite scary, but quite fun. As I move down the list, because we could be here all day, I kid you not, we could be here the entire day talking about this. So to talk about Risky Business briefly, one of the easiest scenarios in the game, most of the recommendations here are harder than average. Some of them are quite straightforward. Goblin upgrade gives him Goblin gear. He is, Green Goblin, surprise, Norman Osborn, kind of changes form in that scenario. So that one just makes a lot of sense. And if you play the slow game and, build up, kind of take advantage of the scenario's mechanics, he will sort of accumulate Goblin kind of pumpkin bombs and all sorts of different attacks, which is kind of fun and challenging. So I think that works fairly well. But we go down and I've got a few different ones here. Criminal Enterprise really plays into the theme of the crime stuff he has going on. Mercenary Army, because all of his minions have the mercenary trait in that scenario. So do they in Batrock's Brigade, and Ransacked Armory seems really thematic there. Then I've got a few to do with Madness, which is one of the central themes of this scenario, because he's kind of, losing his mind to the Green Goblin. You kind of knock him back and forth between forms, and some of these have cards which kind of make you go alter ego, which makes him scheme, which makes him kind of revert back to the Goblin. Other ones, like Protect the Madness, has a bunch of cards which slow down your attacks, and subsequently mean that you can flip him to Green Goblin form and be ready to damage him, but it'll be harder to damage him, if that makes sense. I think my favorite one here is going to be Osborn's Thunderbolts, because it introduces 2 of the Thunderbolt modular sets from Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So even if you're keeping him in Norman Osborn form, he's not attacking you, you do have a high chance to produce a minion who is going to start punching you in the face. And not just any minion, a huge minion with basically as much health as a villain might have, at least in solo play. So that kind of keeps you on your toes while you might be kind of, otherwise gaming the scenario. Mutagen formula, I have a whole variety of stuff here for. One of my favorite ones I actually saw on Discord many years ago. I don't remember who recommended it, but when Mojo Mania came out, somebody pointed out that the Goblin minion in the Fantasy mod set has the Goblin trait, and the Mutagen formula scenario uses the Goblin trait to do different things in a scenario, such as add more threat onto the main scheme and trigger different things. So what I'm calling the Little Lost Goblin kind of combination here, if you put Fantasy into Mutagen formula, you give the Green Goblin an extra Goblin, which I think is really fun. But you also kind of turn the scenario on its head thematically. It's more kind of like a fantasy goblin in a way. I don't know, I think it's kind of fun. I also like Guerrilla Tactics here. Its mutagen formula has a lot of minions going on. And something you'll see, the kind of modular sets almost come in waves. So at the beginning of Marvel Champions, all of these scenarios are primarily crime-based. Then we'll get on to Rise of Red Skull, which is Hydra-based, and you'll see a lot of Hydra mod sets and so on and so forth. There is some variety, but you'll see some of the similar sets used in kind of close proximity when villains fit the same theme, released at the same kind of time. One of the weirder ones is going to be the Wrecking Crew, because they don't normally have a mod set added, because they are, 4 villains, it's a multi-villain scenario, and each one of them has their own deck. You don't even normally use the standard modular set or obligations. So if you are interested in making the Wrecking Crew a little bit more interesting and willing to kind of break the rules just a little bit, so what we can do, you've got the 4 villain decks, you can just add one modular set to each one. So some of the ones I put together are Get Wrecked, which is a combination of City and Chaos, State of Emergency, Down to Earth, and Power Drain, which basically represents the Wrecking Crew wrecking stuff. The city's in chaos, everything's, it's a state of emergency. The last one is All Out Assault. Because the Wrecking Crew do something interesting when they attack, we can add a set that adds extra attacks into each of their decks. The standard set does this, Hydra Assault does this with boost effects, Weapon Master and Symbiotic Strength do it with encounter card when revealed effects on treacheries. So as we get down to the Rise of Red Skull, up first we have Crossbones, and he's quite an interesting villain to talk about modular sets with. He always has the Experimental Weapons modular set, it forms a side deck, you always have that no matter what other free modular sets you have, because he does ask for free modular sets, so that's what we're doing here. Now what's especially important for Crossbones is to have weapons in his modular sets, because he has his Treachery card, which discards until you find a weapon, and if you don't put enough weapons in there, he will discard his entire deck, which is probably not what you want, unless you do intentionally lean into it, like the kind of modular set combination I've got here for him, called Weaponless, where we kind of accept that the whole deck is going to reset, and we're going to get an acceleration token. That kind of becomes the intentional outcome of his card if we don't have any weapons left, because he does always have the machine gun to begin with. So for these modular sets, every asterisk next to a set denotes that there is a weapon in there, and I have a minimum of 2, which is what he normally has from his typical free recommended modular sets. I think my favourite set here is what I'm calling Reaver Fever, Crossbones with the Reavers and Deathstrike, because Lady Deathstrike in that mod set has the Reaver trait, so she will trigger the teamwork from the other Reavers there. The Reavers just look like Crossbones. They wear black and white, they're kind of mercenary guys, kind of like Crossbones in a way, very similar on theme. Crossbones looks, and even his name kind of just fits like he could be one of them. And of course you could change up Reaver Fever, you could swap out Weapon Master for Ransacked Armory, or honestly Under Attack, or any of the other ones I've got on the screen here. There are even more sets than I have used here for Crossbones that have multiple weapons in them. I think Goblin Gimmicks is another one. So don't feel like you have to stick with exactly what is here, but I do think that adding some extra attacks into Crossbones with Weapon Master alongside these difficult minions kind of gives you a well-balanced scenario. Next up we have Absorbing Man, who, I struggled with. Absorbing Man is such a weird scenario. He has an environment which gives him a trait, and then when he gets an encounter card, it checks to see if you have the matching trait. And if you do, it's probably a good, interesting encounter card. But most of the time you won't. So the encounter card is really weak and wimpy, and I don't like it. And there isn't really a super easy way to make this match up better. One of the things you can do is swap out the modular set he has for the Infinity Gauntlet set, which is what Infinity Man is. It's kind of the second one down here. Infinity Gauntlet doesn't add any card into the encounter deck. Normally I don't recommend it as a like-for-like replacement. Normally I say with Infinity Gauntlet, you should add it on top of a different modular set as kind of, as a second modular set. But here, just to try and make Absorbing Man's cards find each other better, having a smaller encounter deck can actually be in your favor. And the Infinity Gauntlet is actually quite good at delaying you because it can heal the villain, it can stun you, and interestingly, he will try and discard to find a minion with the Space Stone, and he won't have any minions here, so you get an acceleration icon, kind of, making his ability to delay you worse as you're under more pressure, if that makes sense. So I think that's kind of a fun intentional, a bit like Crossbones not putting any weapons in, Absorbing Man intentionally not putting any minions in. Skipping over to Taskmaster, the first one I have is called Trickmaster, which uses the new Trickster Magic modular set. And what I really like about that is you defeat a minion and you get an ally. What Taskmaster already has are side schemes, which you defeat the side scheme, you get an ally. So it lets you get even more allies from a different kind of method, but it's kind of similar, and I think that's kind of fun. It's going to give you a lot of allies, of course, but I just think it's kind of unusual and interesting to have them both in one scenario. And in a similar but kind of opposite vein, on the opposite side of the screen, actually aiming to learn, give him aim abduction. That modular set takes away allies, so you can kind of rescue them, and then he can kind of re-abduct them in a sort of way. And I think that's kind of a fun, kind of almost mechanical theme. It's theme, but it's not theme. Although I do know Taskmaster has worked with aim before, so it does thematically work too on a true theme level. Taskmaster is actually really interesting mechanically because he uses boost icons to damage you. If you change from alter ego to hero form, you discard and take damage equal to the boost icons. So if you look at the second one down on the left for Taskmaster, Boost Master, give him Sinister Assault. All of them have 3 boost icons. It's a really fun modular set for that purpose. And he's going to hurt you on the way down. Skip further down to where I've given him 2 modular sets instead of 1. Down to Earth and Whispers of Paranoia, as well as, next to Crime Master, we have Master of the Nine Realms, where I've given him Enchantress and Frost Giants. All of these sets, and actually the next one, Task Madness, I think there's kind of a theme here where I'm adding in 2 modular sets. All of these combos of 2 with the orange difficulty rating give him cards that make you go alter ego, mainly in terms of obligations and things. The more he forces you alter ego, the more you're going to have to go back to hero form and take even more damage. So I think that's kind of a fun way to kind of bring out more of the scenario that way, even if we've otherwise quote-unquote diluted it by adding more cards in. We're actually triggering his main scheme ability more often. We're going to quicken the pace soon because there's so much to get to. I think we've been talking for like over 20 minutes and we've only done 1 expansion. So we're going to go to Zola and Red Skull there because I think these are 2 of the most interesting ones to change the mod sets for. Red Skull definitely, at least. With Zola, I really like that he's these kind of minion upgrades. So when you add minions into the, I should say attachments, minion attachments. So when you add new minions into Zola, they have all the possibility to get these crazy attachments, to have Zola go full mad scientist and upgrade them. But also, he doesn't normally add more minions. He has his own minions. You can also add sets which give him something kind of to work alongside, a kind of a different angle, while he's otherwise fulfilling his minion game plan. Again, Guerrilla Tactics, as I mentioned before, works really well here because there are so many minions. You can even do something crazy like add in Band of Badoon and just have tons of minions on top of tons of minions. I think Ransacked Armory is one of the most thematic ones for him. It gives him even more upgrades for his, his mutates, for his experiments. And because he is very low hit points, his main weakness is being rushed. Something like Blue Moon, which adds in more minions and gives all minions guard, so he cannot be attacked as easily, is kind of fun in that way. I think one of my favorite ones, and this isn't my suggestion necessarily, it was kind of recommended when I did a kind of Halloween modular set ideas thing on Reddit. Dr. Frankenstein on the left here is an idea where you give him running interference, and Zola is effectively Dr. Frankenstein, and Tombstone within that set is Frankenstein's monster. So if you need a Halloween game, that's going to be one of my highest recommendations. Red Skull, however, is one of the best villains / scenarios in the game to change up the modular sets and get something different, because every round he puts out another side scheme, and the side schemes from the modulars are included in that side deck of modulars, and you can really shake up the entire game. It gets really fun. My favorite one is actually very difficult. It's a Red Skull in Time, I'm calling it, but it's Master of Time and the Necronauts, the bonus time-oriented sets that come with the Once and Future Kang scenario pack. They have a lot of really nasty side schemes with the hazard icon, and because of the timing, it comes up before you get encounter cards. It does cause you to draw extra encounter cards, which can be quite painful, but it's quite exciting. It's a good challenge, but you might want to take some stronger heroes and pretty strong decks for that one. On the flip side, we can go down to Rehydration, where I'm using some different Hydra-themed Nemesis sets, and they are really good to kind of give you that Hydra experience like he normally has, with a difference. By bringing a Winter Soldier's Nemesis set, we get the Crossbones minion. With Black Widows, we get Taskmaster, but Winter Soldier's side scheme is really interesting in that it boosts Hydra minions' health, so it kind of makes the minions in the encounter set more interesting when Red Skull brings out that side scheme. And the timing can kind of help that, and I just think it's kind of fun to mess around with, but there's a lot you can do here. I know Nebula and Ronan are some of the more controversial villains in the game. People will be interested in those, and on half of what I've recommended, I'm trying to make it easier, because Ronan and Nebula can be very, very difficult to the point people might not want to play them. But on the other hand, particularly with Ronan, if you want something difficult, a lot of people do look to him just for the difficulty. I've got some really difficult ones there for him as well, including Infinity Ronan, which is Infinity Gauntlet, and Super Strength modulars, along with Kree Militants, which he normally has, He's going to have an extra +2 attack all the time, more of his universal weapon. It's going to hurt you. Super strength means he is steady. Even if you get to the hammer, he's not stalwart, but he's still hard to stun. And Kree militants can add in some random overkill and stuff and piercing. So you're never safe against this version of Ronan. So, if you're beating Ronan too easy, you wish the game was even harder, you can give this a try. It's definitely beatable, but you're going to have a humongous challenge. I actually really like Ebony more I got here. I gave him a ton of magic-themed kind of combinations. There's actually a lot of magical or near-magical stuff, or stuff that's so bizarre it could be magic in Marvel Champions modular sets. Master of Puppets on the right includes a new Trickster Magic set, along with the Shadow King. So it's minions which can become allies, but also your allies can become minions. I think that's kind of fun. It might be a bit childish, but I also like the at the bottom, the Emperor Palpatine setup I gave Ebony more, which is two kind of electrical, kind of power-themed kind of modulars, and then telepathy, which is, the Force. Don't sue me, please, Star Wars. It's just if you're going to go beyond the recommended amount of modulars, which for Ebony Maw is 2, you've got to make it fun or do something interesting. And in this case, I went for fun. Next, from the same box as Ebony Maw, I do want to talk about Thanos quickly. On the bottom right for Thanos, I've got one called Rip Up Your Deck. Now, space pirates are quite annoying. Not everyone is going to like this, but I think it's kind of fun in terms of at least what is possible here. Because what's going to happen is Thanos' Space Stone, it's going to trigger, he's going to bring in a space pirate, it's going to quick strike you, take a card away, you can remove it from your deck for the whole game. Then, during the normal kind of villain activation step where minions also activate, because it's there, the space pirate is going to attack you again and take another card. But then with Dystopian Nightmare, which introduces main schemes with Crisis and Confuse, in combination with things like the Space Stone and extra boost cards and stuff, Thanos could potentially scheme over the main scheme and snap half of your remaining deck away, and then the Space Pirate's going to keep trying to steal even more of it. So the idea is to kind of shred your deck as much as possible, and see if you can get around that happening. Something that I think more people will like is if we go to the other side of difficulty. Instead of being much harder, we go easier. We've got what I call the Reality Stone, which is using fantasy and temporal. So having weird creatures from different places in time kind of be made by the Reality Stone. So I suppose the Time Stone would also work for some of these, maybe not the dragon or, goblins, but it would certainly work for the ancient warriors and, the futuristic stuff from temporal. So using the Infinity Stones to bring in some weird enemies for you. Now that's easier than the default Thanos. Going over to Hela, there's a variety here. I think you can usually go to the kind of orange difficulty ones without too much trouble. So, some people will have better luck with these than others. I quite like Asgardian Giants. She normally has Frost Giants, but if you introduce Thor's Nemesis set, she has 2 extra Frost Giants. And then there's Loki, technically a Frost Giant. And, Loki and Hela both fighting you, I feel like is kind of thematic. You've got 2 Asgardian bad guys. So I kind of like that. There's also Bigger and Better, which is Ransacked Armory and Power of the Atom. That's kind of the bottom of the options here. And this one introduces another big enemy from Power of the Atom, Radioactive Man, which is, to my mind, kind of similar to the big, Worf and the other big kind of minions she has out that kind of guard her side schemes. So sometimes you get rid of a minion and then you leave the first side scheme there and you kind of build up your board and keep the game going, kind of maintain that easy status quo. And then when you're built up, you start to move through everything. Well, while you're doing that, now Radioactive Man can come out and attack you. It's almost like one of her minions has kind of been reborn, and you're going to have to work through a massive amount of hit points. To make matters worse, you might get an upgrade from Ransacked Armory put onto Radioactive Man, or Garm, I think is the wolf's name, anything like that. So these Ransacked Armory upgrades can go into some of these big minions, which might not be in your best interest, which I think is kind of fun. Oh, and I should also mention the Victory Dismay. So Hela, when you defeat her side schemes, they go to the Victory Display. It's one of her main mechanics, and her basic stats increase with that. If you use the Galactic Artifacts and future past modular sets, you add in a whole bunch more side schemes which can have the Victory keyword, and she can end up hitting for absurd amounts of damage. If you use player side schemes, maybe Cable, this can go absolutely crazy. I haven't done the maths on how high, but very, very high. Don't recommend it all the time, but if you want to kind of push the game's capabilities. Otherwise, I generally recommend anything from the first or second row here for Hela. If you want something a little bit more manageable, although, some of these are still a little bit on the challenging side. The Ice Queen with Frost Giant and Avalanche, 2 of the snowy themed sets, little bit tough as well. Okay, so I need to kind of zoom out, speed up a little bit. We're not even halfway, but I do just wanted to talk about Loki. Now, I haven't put any difficult ones in Loki because this scenario takes a long time already. So personally, my list of the best is not going to include anything that really takes him, makes him take longer than normal. There are a few fun ones here. Some of them are like illusions of betrayal on the left or false trends on the right of Loki. What about, him tricking people, creating illusions? And I think that kind of thing is fun. Also one based on a new scenario coming out, or just released really in Trickster Takeover with the Trickster Magic modular set that's at the top middle. But at the bottom, I've got ones based off the MCU, of the Avengers movie, and of his own series as well. Now, whether you like those, I think will partially be based on whether you actually like Loki, but I thought they were fun to mention. The Hood is someone we should talk about. It's a scenario pack. The villain there is very weird. You set aside 7 modular sets, and he will add a few in as the scenario progresses. On the left here at the top, I've got one called Fair Play, which if you want to play the Hood and not be annoyed by the swinginess too much, I think these are somewhat fair, slightly on the easy side, but not like super easy. They still have some stuff you have to respect a little bit. But generally, it's going to make the scenario easier and feel a bit less, take away some of the downsides that I sometimes feel, but the Hood has a lot of upsides as well. Having these random sets enter play at different times, having, all this possibility is very kind of dynamic in a way, and there is a lot of fun from that as well. And if you want to lean into that, there are 5 other suggestions here. One based on dark magic, which the Hood is known to use. Obviously not exactly like this, but I'm just taking all the dark magic I can get in Marvel Champions effectively. He is known to build a criminal empire, which is what I've got on the right-hand side at the top. All different crime sets. Several of them have cards which reference other criminal minions, so they kind of have interaction in that way. At the bottom left, I've got kind of a Halloween one, Trick or Treat. What I like about this is it has a mixture of really difficult and also really easy modular sets. So when you go to add in a new modular set, it's really luck of the draw what you get, and I think that's kind of a fun surprise to see what you end up with. Other than that, I've got Masters of Evil United, which I really like. There are minions here with the Masters of Evil trait in all 7 of the sets listed here. So this is a way to play with as many Masters of Evil as possible that you can. So I think that's kind of fun. And lastly, I've got Anti-Rush, which is very mechanical. And this is all because the Hood, the main strategy to beat him, if you're, really trying to be serious about it, is to go fast. Because the longer the scenario goes on, the more mod sets he adds, and that makes him a lot harder. So you try and rush him down. Anti-Rush has a bunch of stuff with guard, stuns, things that say you can't attack, all that kind of good stuff. So that one is going to kind of, counteract what you're actually trying to do to win in some ways. So I think that's kind of fun too. Then we get onto the Sinister Motives box, which I know is very popular, even if it's, maybe not as available as it used to be. So next up we have Sandman, and Sandman I've got some interesting sets for. I think Sinister Assault works really well. I keep mentioning this set. It's such a good set because it's A, 6 interesting minions, but it's B, a bunch of boost icons. And those cause Sandman to do so much extra indirect damage. He can be quite a problem. I think it's quite a nice way to increase the challenge of the scenario. If you want to add in 2 modular sets, I really like turning Sandman into Snowman, which is the bottom left set, which is Frost Giants, and White Out, which is the new Thunderbolt set, newish at least, with Avalanche, I believe his name is. So it's a whole snow-themed thing going on with Sandman, which I like. But on top of that, they all have a lot of boost icons, which again makes his indirect damage a lot more tricky to deal with, upping the challenge. There's really so many to talk about and not enough time for Mysterio. What's quite difficult is that the illusion trait interacts with him, and the only 2 sets, I suppose, that have the illusion trait are the ones he normally has anyway. So you cannot really play into the illusion trait, even with the new stuff coming out with, the Trickster Takeover expansion, scenario pack. But there is a lot of thematic stuff we can do. Mysterio could frame you, or, find out your secret identity or something. Now S.H.I.E.L.D. are after you. That's the top right-hand one here. Also got what I call Twisted Funfair beneath with Arcade. I think that's a very fun kind of theme. Arcade has cards, like twisting mirrors and all this kind of stuff that just seems to fit thematically very well with Mysterio. There's also a comic reference here, Doom's Brigade. If you use Batroc's Brigade with Mysterio, that's a bunch of people from Doom's Brigade in the comics, and so on and so forth. Some of the ones I think I like the most are what I'm calling Jurassic Park, which is Savage Land, so a bunch of illusionary dinosaurs. And also at the bottom right, Special Effects Expert, which is just any Mojo Mania modular set. You start to add some of these kind of TV film genres to the guy who's the special effects master. I think that's kind of a fun kind of a twist. Sinister 6 is also weird for modular sets because it doesn't normally have any. Well, it has a mandatory one in Guerrilla Tactics, but aside from that, doesn't normally. But you can actually add in other members that have been in the Sinister 6. There's a lot of mod sets which include them, and then some which are just fun mechanically. You know, if you start to include Genosha, you start to make the active villain steady. It can be kind of interesting. You can't shut the villain down as easily, so on and so forth. Sabretooth is one of the villains I always recommend people change the modular sets for because Mystique is incredibly annoying. I've got a few here called Otherhood. I've got Otherhood 1, 2, 3, and 4, and these all use the recommended Brotherhood modular set with a different secondary modular set, not Mystique. Although the first suggestion is Rogue's Nemesis set, which is also Mystique. She's also quite annoying, but not anywhere near as annoying in my opinion. You can also include Iceman's Nemesis set or Quicksilver's Nemesis set, which includes an extra member of the Brotherhood. Now, they have the same name. You know, Iceman's Nemesis set is Pyro. Pyro is already in Brotherhood, but it just means you have more chance to find a copy of Pyro, whichever Pyro it is. And if Pyro is already in play, when you would go to reveal a new Pyro, you just skip it. You just get a new encounter card instead. Those are the rules. And this far down the list, you know, we're beyond Ultron. I'm starting to include a little bit of stuff like that. But my favorite one here is probably Otherhood 4, which is a Brotherhood modular still, but then Sci-Fi, which introduces kind of robotic program kind of versions of all the Brotherhood members. So you're going to have Blob and then Blob 1.34 or whatever it is. And I think that's really fun to have both of those. And because of Robert Kelly, obviously, and what they're actually trying to do here, there are some that are more purely assassin themed as opposed to kind of X-Men themed. There's kind of a mixture here. And also one I use quite a bit, Oops Joined Hydra. This one makes it into quite a lot of my scenarios, only because Weapon Master adds extra attacks in. Hydra Assault adds extra attacks in, and they both combined have a Hydra theme. Weapon Master has, you know, Hydra sidearm and so forth, so they kind of fit together. And aside from the extra attacking, they are not too difficult, so it can raise the difficulty one way without pushing you another way. So you might have seen this throughout the video, throughout the document. I like that combo a lot. So any villain that does something special when it attacks, like Sabretooth, I'm probably including those in some way. Again, Mansion Attack, having that Mystique modular set in, I do recommend you change it. And I've got some of the Otherhood sets here as well, including the Sci-Fi one, which again is my favorite way to play Mansion Attack as well. For Magneto, there's a big variety, but there's quite a lot of ones that make him easier just because he's pretty tough and not everyone likes that. I do like that, but you can replace his Acolytes modular set with Magneto Heroes Nemesis set, which includes some of the Acolytes but in a slightly easier way. I think perhaps the easiest way to make him easier though is replace his normal modular set, Acolytes, with Brotherhood. This is just thematic really again here, but getting to fight Magneto with his, army of evil mutants, Brotherhood of evil mutants, I think just makes a lot of sense and is very, very fun. Then we've got the Mojo Mania villains. And Magog kind of works like a normal villain that you can put normal mod sets in. Now, the more you kind of dilute his deck, the less stuff that messes with the counters and, the whole way you get the crowd cheering and that kind of stuff. So I mostly recommend one, but there are some fun ones. The Blue Moon mod set has, Gladiator and the Trial by Combat side scheme, which I think works really well with the kind of arena fight going on here. You can put the Colosseum in Genosha, and suddenly you can't stun lock Magog. I think that makes the kind of the challenge a lot harder. And I've also got one here that does have two mod sets called the Grand Champion, which is Magog and absolutely no minions, so you're just against him with all these extra weapons and armor, which I think is kind of fun. Going across the Spiral, she doesn't normally have any additional modular sets, but I think there are some fun options. I think Streets of Mayhem, because she's trying to run away, she's running through all these different environments. You can add in some more kind of locations in City, kind of just to give an extra layer of kind of craziness in her attempt to escape. Symbiotic Strength will make her attack again, but it can also slow you down attacking her. She is quite potent when she attacks. She will scheme if she's hidden, or she might have her swords out if she's not hidden. So getting attacked an extra time is difficult. But also when you do reveal her, you want to be able to defeat her. So if you are webbed up from Symbiotic Strength, you're going to have a problem. Oh, and I should also mention when she attacks, she is more likely to become hidden again quicker. So extra attacks in her are pretty scary. And in the comics, she's also in the Sisterhood of Mutants. So I've included a couple of mod sets, which will have a character from that. But she's a little bit weird in that she doesn't normally have any mod sets added. Mojo is also in the same boat here, where he doesn't normally have any modular sets added, and he has this extra loss condition where if the encounter deck resets too many times, you lose the game. So the more modular sets you add into his encounter deck, the kind of easier you make it, because you're giving yourself more time for the kind of encounter deck to reset and so on and so forth. But you can add in something like Hope Summers, which only adds 1 into the encounter deck, so it doesn't mess with it much, but then you get Hope Summers helping you. You can add in Longshot, who is added anyway in campaign mode. But what I kind of think is maybe the most fun one here is Power Drain, which is a modular set which makes you discard a card from an encounter deck. So you're adding cards into the encounter deck, but then those cards you've added are going to start to shred the encounter deck down quicker and actually reduce the time you have to defeat Mojo. So I quite like that. I think you guys have most of the idea now. I can't go through all of them. One kind of interesting thing I will mention with Morlock Siege is if you give them something like the Telepathy or Super Strength or Flight modular, because it's a stack of villains, when you defeat one, the permanent attachment goes on to the next villain. Hopefully that makes sense. If you played with Telepathy or Super Strength or Flight before, you know that they've got that setup card out, always attached to the villain. If the villain goes away, it just falls to the different next villain here, which is kind of fun. So all of them would be telepathic in this instance, with this bottom option of Tide Morlocks, which is going to try and exhaust all of your allies, in this case, which is going to be the Morlocks. I quite enjoyed the ones I've got for 4 Horsemen here. Some of them are just kind of, you know, quote-unquote normal, but some of them I've tried to theme around what the Horsemen do, a little bit like Absorbing Man. So the Horsemen of War, for example, takes away your upgrades and things like that. So there's a Children of Thanos set, so there's the Extreme Measure set. So this Horsemen of War combination is all about taking away your hard-played, you know, upgrades and things on the board. Whereas the Horsemen of Death is all about pinging damage across your characters, and that's what the Under Attack set does, and that's what Menagerie Medley does as well with the weird space sharks. So by adding both of those in, we can really kind of replicate the effects of the Horsemen of Death into the encounter deck. So I've had a lot of fun doing that as well. Okay, as we get down to like the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. stuff, you'll see a general kind of, you know, there's a lot of sneaky stuff going on, there's a lot of aim stuff going on. A lot of these characters have worked for Hydra before, so there's a lot of Hydra stuff going on. Something I think is quite interesting is the Thunderbolt scenario, because it doesn't normally have any additional modular sets, but there are so many modular sets in the game which contain characters that have been in the Thunderbolts. So I think sneaking 1 or 2 of those in there is absolutely fine. I've got a whole list of those on the left, and of course the other Thunderbolt modular sets which are left over that you don't normally include. But there's also a bunch of shield ones and things you can do here, which I think is kind of fun. And obviously Baron Zemo as well. You know, he's done a lot of stuff with Hydra. There's a lot of kind of stuff going on with his set in terms of, you know, he is sneaky, so there's kind of more sneaky stuff. I've got one on the top right here called Suspicious Minds with Trickster Magic and Whispers of Paranoia. It's very much him tricking people and being all secretive. He has this really fun encounter card called Reluctant Foe, which makes one of your heroes from your card collection come out and try and stop you. So using some of the stuff come up in Civil War, I've got some sets in the middle here, Reluctant Foes 1, 2, and 3, where you can have friendly characters turn against you, which I think is really fun. And of course, the original Baron Zemo formed the Masters of Evil originally, and, you know, worked with Enchantress and had all sorts of shenanigans and plans going on at one point. So that's down at the bottom left, Old Man's Plan, because I believe the Baron Zemo we fight is the son of kind of the original Baron Zemo that was in the Captain America comics or something. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff, but, you know, I believe the younger one it might be, I think, forms the Army of Evil. Comics people can update me, but certainly they have a lot of the Masters of Evil in that army as well as the Wrecking Crew, among other characters. So I've tried to include that here as well for some kind of more comic storyline tie-ins. And then we move down to the stuff that isn't released yet, or in my case for Trickster Takeover, is a little bit delayed across most of Europe. So we've got Enchantress and God of Lies version of Loki, and this is mostly, you know, it's got magic, it's got illusions. I haven't played yet, so I'm not going to stand by these ones 110% or talk about them too long. But what the God of Lies Loki one has, it's got a couple of sets in here, such as Goblin Gimmicks, which are called Treacherous Goblin, because he kind of punishes you when he draws treacheries. So the more treacheries you have in there, the more his villain card Lokis are getting kind of bonuses. So having those sets which have a lot of treacheries in is kind of fun. So if you see one that looks kind of weird there, such as you know, Growing Strong, which are called Not a Frost Giant, this set has Atlas, who's a huge Thunderbolt, very difficult minion, loads of hit points. But he comes, aside from, you know, himself, with 4 treacheries. So 4 out of 5 cards in his set are a treachery, increasing the average treacheries in the encounter deck quite significantly there. So that kind of thing is the thought process. What I've got next is stuff ready for Civil War, and I'm really excited about these. I'm sure they'll use at least 2 modular sets given the size and the quantity of the modular sets that we've already seen. I'm not 100% sure, so I will obviously update this, and I'll fix anything with the Loki and Enchantress stuff as stuff comes out. That is my intention, at least up until the scenario pack SmackDown that comes out after Civil War. Fully intending to do that, so fingers crossed I can keep up with it all. But Iron Man, there are so many interesting things you could do with him based on the comics. A very simple way. You can give him something like a suit of armor around the world, quite an iconic line from the Age of Ultron movie. You can include Vision's Nemesis set to give him Ultron and some drones, and then Sentinels as extra robots. I think that's kind of fun. You can include quite a few members of the Illuminati with sets that already come in the Civil War expansion. You can give him the kind of Extreme Beat suit in a way, which is kind of a symbiotic Iron Man armor, by giving him symbiotic strength and Venom's Nemesis set. Stuff like that I think is really fun. And at the bottom right, a little reference to a little MCU movie, which I think is pretty fun. Scrolling down, and we might as well go in order, we've got Captain Marvel, and she has a lot of thematic stuff you can do with her. I thought by using Ship Command and Space Pirates, we can really represent her time with the Starjammers, who are, I don't know, some scallywags, some in space. She actually ends up harboring the Venom symbiote in the comics, and the symbiote ends up saying she's its favorite host at one point. So I think the symbiote stuff works well for her too. If you've seen the movie, etc., she's fighting alongside the Kree, at some point. So the Kree warrior thing here, on the left with the Kree militant set and her Nemesis set with, that Yog guy, I think works well here. Moving over to Captain America. Honestly, I didn't have a ton for him. He has been called Captain Venom before the symbiote, so that's kind of a cheap, easy one I can throw on most of these good guys. But, there's been a couple of interesting, slightly controversial Hydra storylines with him I'm aware of. But otherwise, just working with S.H.I.E.L.D., leading some troops seems kind of on point for Cap. But I definitely struggled with him. But I didn't struggle with Spider-Woman, who's kind of been a bit of a double agent. She's kind of had some... made some interesting choices in terms of Hydra when Hydra offered her stuff, which has led to some of these things here. So yes, she's been an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., but she's also kind of been a double agent with Hydra. She's also been an agent of S.W.O.R.D., and I've seen that S.W.O.R.D. have actually, at least briefly, worked with some of the Nasty Boys and Avalanche, so that's what that one is about. It's a little bit of a stretch, I think, but, trying to find something for some of these good characters when most of the mod sets I've got to use are of sort of bad, sort of quote-unquote evil characters. And really, that concludes our list. There's a lot there. There's a lot more I could go through. Hopefully this is giving you some of the scale of what I've got here. Everything is carefully named. I've been through basically every villain with every modular set, card by card. I've done hundreds of games. It's been a lot to get here, and hopefully it's, looks presentable. Hopefully this information kind of at the top makes it really usable. And if you haven't already, now is kind of the time to go into the description and make sure you download it, have it on your phone, have it wherever, and make it really accessible, because I think it's really, really useful, and hopefully you've enjoyed this. So thank you for watching. I dread to think how long this has got. I was trying to do like half an hour, 45 minutes. It's probably going to be an hour or more. But this was still just the tip of the iceberg. I don't think I even covered 20% of the possibilities here. So very much a lightning quick look that probably took over an hour. But if you watched this whole journey, thank you so much. And I'll see you in the next video.